handwriting, but like they had little like calligraphy handwriting.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. In the textbook, we are on page 556. And it starts at the section titled The Second American Revolution. So in the slideshow, I'm not sure which number slide this is. But it starts at the focus question, how did the Civil War transform the national economy?
On the slides of those?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what are we talking about here when we look at this subsection titled Liberty and the Union? The first sentence says, never was freedom's contested nature more evident than during the Civil War. What does that mean?
It's definition to people.
Okay, so to people rather than just definition in general. We've kind of been talking about the whole time this changing notion of what liberty and freedom actually means. What does it mean, I guess let's say to Lincoln and those who are sympathetic to his views or agree with his views? Iris.
Emancipation for all, but like nobody should be like under slavery.
Okay, so no one enslaved. Angela, I'm going to add.
Still doesn't really believe in equality because like he doesn't give people the same like amount of pay for their work. And I remember like he said like he didn't want African Americans like taking white jobs and stuff.
Okay, so if you combine both of those answers, like Iris said, he believes in freedom for everyone, but not necessarily equality. Daniel.
He believes in like the natural human rights for everyone, but yeah, not necessarily equality.
So again,
So like there's
labor, that kind of thing.
He just
Like you want
feels
people to be able to
like
labor,
slavery,
but it doesn't mean it's
yeah.
equal in what you get from it.
Okay, develop that idea a little bit.
He believes everyone's a human, but he doesn't necessarily believe they're equal. Like how people view like different people, like some people view like smart people are better than, not smart people. Stronger people are like best. So he kind of views like, he thinks of everyone as a human almost, but that only whites should have like the American rights of like being able to promote their wealth.
Okay, and this is that view is very in keeping with kind of the worldwide philosophies that are going on at the time. There is a hierarchy. Some people are inherently higher than other people, and that's ordained by God. Like, that's just how it is. People are above animals, so therefore there is stratification within groups of humans. What about our southern whites? What does it say here?
Ability and mastership.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of similar.
Yeah.
But how is it different from the way our northerners are looking at it?
Liberty is the power to do whatever you want with whoever you want. Specifically.
For some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's-
really only for white men.
Yeah. Like it's using the hierarchy, but it's saying if you're higher than the other people in the hierarchy, freedom is that you can use them for your own gain.
I feel like it's also a lot more based on like, as far as like hierarchy within white people, it's a lot more based on wealth. Because in the north, it's like you can do a job and get a promotion, but like in the south, it's like if you own a plantation, you're rich. If you have a small farm, you're just gonna be poor. Like there's not as much as the social mobility of being able to like go up.
All right, what if I said that for these people, control and the types of control a person is able to exert equals their idea of freedom?
Yeah.
What would that mean to you?
Can you repeat it again?
Okay, so control and the amount of control that a person is able to exert that is in keeping with their idea of what freedom actually is. How does that, can you further explain that based on the reading? Angela?
So kind of like freedom isn't just being able to do like what you want, but it's being able to do what you want and have other people do what you want to.
So you're basically saying
But-
by having, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
By having control, you can control other people's freedom. Is that kind of-
But who would believe that?
Clarification on this?
Yeah, it's people
The
higher-
Southerners.
Higher in the and people up in higher in the hierarchy.
Okay, and so if we look at this, though, it says, let me see. To the north, freedom meant for each man to enjoy the product of his labor. To Southern whites, it conveyed mastership, the power to do as they please with other men, and the product of other men's labor.
Where is that?
It's on page 556, right? This is the first paragraph under Liberty and Union. So again, if you're talking about freedom and control, it seems as if they're two paradoxical concepts, right? Like it feels like they should not mesh together. But here, these are quotes taken from Lincoln. It almost seems as if he is referring to who you can control. Do you have the ability to control yourself? Or do you control yourself along with others? Daniel.
So like for the South, it would be freedom would be like the freedom to control what they are naturally above or what they like believe they're naturally above.
I think you could rationalize it out to that point. Yeah, I think that would work. It's almost as if the Southern whites kind of want to make sure they still have the option to do it. You know, it's like they know that not everyone is going to have the ability or is going to be able to do so, but they still want to be like, I want to be able to have this option to control people that are lower than me and then to benefit from that control. Whereas in the North, it seems almost as if Lincoln is trying to shift it into you worry about yourself. These other people are going to worry about themselves, and that's just how it's going to be. Yes.
That's like the whole Bill of Rights thing too. It's like, or it's like kind of to cut into those political mindsets. Because like with the Bill of Rights, they were saying like we need to be able to have in writing that we can do this. You know, like,
That's a really good link to make. So like making sure that your right to do what you would like is put in law and is maintained in law so that there's never a question about it. Let me see.
I guess that is really a theme of that idea of freedom, where one person's freedom ends and another's begins. For the South, if you're higher than someone, there's no divide. It's just yours. But in the North, they're separating it out into these people. Every individual gets it, and you can't contradict that and try to take someone else's.
All right, so almost as if by taking some people's quote-unquote rights away, you are maintaining the rights of other people.
Didn't Calhoun even say like that if people couldn't own slaves then they were like slaves themselves?
Yes, that was some of the rhetoric that was going around at the time.
Yeah.
You're basically a slave to the market. It's like, but no?
It's not. Calhoun was
He's an interesting guy.
Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so just this last sentence in that section on Liberty and Union, it says, for the first time, wrote the Chicago Tribune, the United States could truly exist as our fathers designed it, the home of freedom, the asylum of the oppressed, the seat of justice, and the land of equal rights under the law. Someone pick apart that sentence and tell me why it's not quite accurate.
well, some of the founding fathers were slave owners, so.
Okay, but simply because you're doing something bad or something that, we don't agree with now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't strive to be better, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, because Jefferson all the time likes to talk about how like lofty, his beliefs were and how all men were created equal and stuff. Even though he was still a slaveholder, it's like, it's almost like that. I know that I'm doing something wrong and I wish I could be better. All the time I look around and I'm like, I really wish I could be one of those people that does that, but I just know I'm not. So I'm not even gonna like work with it. But some people are better than me and they do try to be better. So, maybe that's what we're thinking of here.
Jefferson confuses.
He confuses everyone. Everyone.
The reading you made us do, I was so confused, because it was all over the place.
The
The one, it was, which Jefferson reading did we do?
Was it the one about like the difference between whites?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, whenever I read something from Jefferson.
Sometimes his stuff almost reads like stream of conscious. Like it's almost like he doesn't go back and edit it out to make it a more concise document. He just kind of like writes whatever's coming out of his head.
And he has to rationalize to himself quite often about what he does compared
But
to
don't we
what
all?
he believes.
I mean, we all rationalize our behavior where we're like, okay, well, I can do this because yesterday, okay, so one of the seniors was like, okay, so I have a problem. I have this much money in my bank account and I'm supposed to go buy a replacement retainer with it. Only there are these Lululemon pants that I really want and they're never in stock in my size. And they happen to cost the same amount as the retainer. So what should I do? Should I actually get the retainer or should I get the pants and wait and make my parents pay for the retainer? And I was like, okay, one, who would be in more, what would you be in more trouble for? She's like, oh yeah, definitely not getting the retainer. My dad would be really angry. And I was like, okay. I said, which do you want to do more? And she was like, the pants. And I was like, yeah. I was like, one, I'm a bad person to ask because I would have bought the pants and been like, my teeth can just be bad. It's fine. But I was like, but the adult answer here is go get the retainer, their pants, they will come back in stock.
The retainer, because in the long run, you want your teeth looking better.
I know, that's the adult answer. But some people like instant gratification. I'm one of those people. I don't like to like, I mean, honestly.
You're not gonna wear the thing after you buy it.
You're not. Daniel, do you have a question?
I was gonna say something. I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah, like no, she said he had to rationalize to himself a lot. That's like when the whole thing with the Louisiana Purchase, he had to kind of like come up with a reason. He had to like come up with a reason that it was okay.
Yeah, like he's.
Treaties.
That's within my power. See, and it's a treaty. Yeah.
Everybody thinks that Jefferson's so human, but it's the fact that we get to analyze it because he just wrote this all down.
I mean, to me, the redeeming factor with Jefferson is that he strived to be better than he knew he was.
Didn't quite make it.
And like I don't know, I go back and forth when I read his stuff on whether he knew his own faults or if he was just completely like oblivious to anything about himself. He had absolutely no self-awareness.
Maybe I should have like more sympathy with Jefferson, but the whole thing he did with Sally, and then he didn't even treat her, like that's just
His longtime enslaved mistress, question mark? See, I hate to read too much into that relationship though, because people are complicated and the amount of information we have about that relationship is scant. And we have nothing from Sally. We have no information on her feelings, her understanding of the situation. Well, we have nothing. So,
it's like you don't know if she's doing it willingly or if Jefferson forced her.
and I mean, to a point, you don't want to put modern understandings of the way the world works onto historical ways the world works.
It's like when people just tried to be like, well, he didn't marry anybody, so he was definitely gay back then.
Yeah, like you can't do that. We want to because, it's fun to throw in like little wrinkles into the historical record just to like make it a little bit more interesting to us. But you can't go that far, like you can with historical fiction. Sure, who cares? Make him gay. I don't care. But unless you have actual evidence for that, I mean, you can postulate all you want to, but at the end of the day, you have no evidence for it, so you can't really go out on that limb and be like, oh yes, James Buchanan was gay. there's some stuff that you can read into, but we don't have anything that's like a love letter between him and another man. We don't have him being like, that dude's hot looking. Like, we don't have that. So we can't say, oh, James Buchanan was gay. We can just be like, haha, what if he was? Like, this is how it would work out had it been that way.
Friendships are really intense.
Yeah, and that's it, is we think of friendship, we have different ways of looking at it now than they did then. Like relationships between males and females were very different historically than they are now. Like you can have like a rich friendship with a man and a woman, and we don't really look at history that way. We're like, oh, well, they must have been having an affair. And it's like, maybe not, maybe they just happened to be friends. And I mean, yeah, you want to read into it because it makes things much juicier, but life is not that fun, honestly. Okay, what is this about Lincoln's vision? It says Lincoln has been called the American equivalent of Giuseppe Mazzini or Otto von Bismarck, who during the same era created nation states in Italy and Germany from disunited collections of principalities.
He wanted America to embody a set of universal ideas.
Okay, and why is this a change, Iris? Why is it a change from before?
Well, before America was kind of behind Europe within their like moral and political ideals, but now that America's doing it, it should be the new worldly thing.
But how were they behind Europe?
Well, Europe already banned slavery and
Right, but we're talking about his idea of America.
Well, America's really more like city-states. It was beforehand in a weird way. Like, they're unionized, but it's very much, we are states.
Okay, so it's that.
We are
he wants
this
a
one
national
union.
identity.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, he's trying to make this national identity. He's creating it out of what?
Well,
This issue?
He's using this issue to create it. But where is he pulling his understanding of the world from? Or the way he wants the world to be, almost.
Democracy?
I mean, yeah, he definitely wants it to be a democracy, because that's what it is. But how is this? I don't think I'm asking the question correctly.
Revolutionary War was like they were getting like closer to being a nation, but then it was like after they beat England, they were like, okay, we're good now, like just go back to being states.
Is it kind of like he wants America to have its own views, its own ideas, instead of looking, I guess, at Europe and following their lead? Is that kind of?
I think that would work. I think you could talk about that because he is definitely, like it says here, ideals allowed immigrants from abroad who could not trace their connection by blood to the nation's birth to fully become American. So he wants to make this, like we were talking about towards the end of the last class, this idea of America rather than the states in America. Like, we have this idea we're all Americans, and then second, we are from the South or from Mississippi or from like whatever. But first, we're Americans, and we have to come up with what does that mean? What does it mean to be an American? What do they say about the Gettysburg Address?
No, he was on a train.
He was on a train. What else?
Isn't it at Gettysburg?
Yes.
They identified the nation's mission.
All men are created equal, new birth of freedom, define the essence of democratic government. Have y'all fully read the Gettysburg Address? I can't remember if I assigned that or not.
I think we not this. No.
Finest?
That was like 2 years ago, so.
This is the Bean's finest, dude.
What now?
And it's less than 3 minutes.
It is. It's very short. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's using what politicians do best, and he's
6, 7.
using words to define it differently. No. You worded it correctly, it means something.
Okay, so y'all probably know the story. He speaks after a very well-known orator He writes the draft on the train there because, like, he's, tired. He's a little busy. He's running a war. Which one is this? Okay, so here is the speech. It's 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. And this part right here is where it seems that he does start to kind of steer people into this, we have the ability to do something special and even, holy to a point in this document. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take the increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. So he's kind of saying Americans themselves are what makes America America. I think we agree with it. If it wouldn't be one of the best,
A country isn't a country unless there's people in it, right?
I don't know. I've never thought about that. That's kind of a philosophical question. Is a country if there's no one there? Who makes it a country? Is it the people in it, or is it the people outside of it? Because if you don't recognize it as a country, is it a country?
That's true.
Ooh.
Nowhere is right.
Isn't that just the entirety?
Now that is really going into the weeds here.
Basically southeastern Europe right now.
Isn't that like Greece?
I mean, well,
What?
There's a neo-Nazi party trying to take over Greece.
Oh, they're trying to take over everywhere.
Don't worry, it's, again, southeastern Europe, there's a lot of things going on over there.
It's always been a mess. It's still a
It
mess.
is. And of course, it's kind of like, maybe we'll recognize you a country over there as they continue.
I think it was Bismarck who said that the Balkans is the problem. And he was basically like, when every government in the entire world falls, it's going to be because of something that happened in the Balkans. And then World War II happened. World War I happened.
Do absolutely nothing.
Oh, the
So
Balkans.
it's a big shot.
Okay, the war in American religion. Somebody tell me about this one. Because I'm sure whoever is listening to this recording, is sick of hearing me talk.
Oh, wait, it's just this is also kind of the weird Victorian thing of death.
Ah.
Up with death, basically, and bring
They're
everyone
very,
together.
death was a very differently celebrated, in Victorian times than it is.
It really was. It's fun to study. And we're also moving into that spiritualism. There is a conflict between these scientific things that are happening and these technological things that are happening and these traditional spiritual matters. So let's see. The war led to what one historian calls a transformation of heaven, as Americans imagined future celestial family reunions that seemed more and more like gatherings in middle-class living rooms. This also, if we look at the Mormon religion, these kind of beliefs influences, I would say, Now, I'm sure Mormons would not agree with me because they believe this is fact, as it's their religion. But I would say that these things kind of influenced the development of the Mormon idea of heaven, because when you are married on earth and you are sealed to your spouse, you can also be sealed to your children. When you go to heaven, they're there with you on your own planet. Daniel.
What did this, like, how did the war have ties to this? Was it just because, like, a lot of people's fathers were dying and they're like, we'll reunite with them in heaven?
Yeah, and I mean, war doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you can't separate out, well, this stuff has to do with the war, and then this stuff has to do with popular culture or society. Like, the developments all happen together. So you do have brothers and husbands and fiancés and what have yous being killed, like in just scores of people. This, at the end of the war, you have almost half of a generation of men dead.
2%?
It's yeah, I can't remember what the actual number is, but it's really high. And so you also have post-war a lot of women who end up being like those maiden aunts. Have you ever heard of like that kind of trope in literature?
Yeah.
Because they literally did not have anyone to marry. That person was killed. Whoever it was that they were supposed to marry or that they could have married, or, they are either dead or they have like a million other women to choose from. So they're like, you're ugly, no. Coping with death required unprecedented governmental action, from notifying next of kin to accounting for the dead and missing. A lot of these philanthropic organizations form in order to take care of not just the dead, but also the graves of the dead. So Daughters of the Confederacy start to take care of the war dead. Daughters of the American Revolution take care of the Union war dead overall. So you have civic organizations that are stepping into the role of what government kind of ends up picking up the tab for. They're like, oh, maybe we should do this.
Funerary service becomes this because it was just a family affair.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Before the Civil War, your family took care of your remains. They buried you probably in a family cemetery. And then post-war, some families never even got back like bones and they didn't know where to look for them because their loved one was killed in battle. They were buried on the battlefield, and then that army took off. Some people went back trying to find those soldiers that had passed away, and they couldn't find them, or they were buried in a mass grave, and so they're in there with a lot of other people that you can't tell who was your loved one and who was someone else's. Liberty in wartime. How does Lincoln really, really, really steer wartime, I'll say rights, like governmental rights that you're entitled to during war?
Like making like specific addresses about it?
How does he steer the country into what is acceptable and is not acceptable to do to your citizens during war?
We spoke out a lot about it just because, like, now that they were split, he kind of had the freedom to, like, talk about and form his own ideas.
This is where we get the case Ex Parte Milligan. The big ruling with Ex Parte Milligan, this is on page 562. This says that you cannot try a civilian in military court as long as there is a civilian court available to try them. It seems an insignificant thing to us, but that is a huge limit that is put on Abraham Lincoln's powers because he expands the powers of the presidency like insanely during the Civil War. Basically, he goes, I wonder how far I can push this, and he pushes it as far as he can.
And that's what happens during the war.
Yes.
So, if like a Union came into Confederate area and they couldn't just grab a citizen and trial them under their court?
Correct. As long as there is a civilian tribunal or a civilian court available, you cannot try a civilian in military court. Which, I mean, like I said, it seems like we'd be like, well, yeah. But they didn't know. Like, at the time, they were like, well, if they've seceded, like, can we try them in these courts that are already set up, that we kind of already set up? Can we do that? Or should we now take them to the military court because they're in rebellion? When you're under martial law, which one do? You know, because you do have the military, like, over the entire state at that point. In this particular decision, the textbook points out that Justice David Davis, wow, his parents hated him, the Constitution is not suspended in wartime. It remains a law for rulers and people equally in times of war and peace. So this is where we actually have the court being like, no, like, you can't just do what you want because we're at war. You can do some things, but you can't do everything.
Where is that?
It's on page 562 at the end of the paragraph that starts with, the courts generally gave the administration a free hand. You see that? And it's this John Merriman case that's mentioned in the textbook, like right there at the very beginning where he's talking about the free hand that's given. That's the one where habeas corpus is suspended in the state of Maryland. Because there's just drama in Maryland. Because, you know, they're a border state, and then there are people who want slavery, so it's like this big, huge, just disaster. And it's so close to D.C. that Lincoln's like, we can't let this continue. So they suspend habeas corpus there, and then eventually in 1866, we have the ex parte Milligan ruling. So it doesn't really affect anything during wartime. But now, in the future, we have this understanding of, oh, well, no, we can't do that. Let's see. The North's transformation. Oh, Daughters of Charity. Look at them with their fun little habits. Well, large habits, I guess. This little baby girl in mourning. Dang it, okay. So we still have a good bit to go.
I think it's still like 5 days.
Yeah. All right, so what I'm going to do is, this is going to be our last class where we will discuss chapter 14 in class. I will record the rest of this, since I've got to record it anyway for the people that are quarantined. I will record the rest of this, and that will be your assignment for homework over the weekend, is to listen to the recording and make notes and, you know, ask questions on Monday? Monday.
Do you want us to read chapter 15?
Yes, please. Read chapter 15. Be ready to start that Monday as well. And it's gonna be great. Yay. All right.